the food system.
Now, so many people think that when you talk about food, you're just talking about literally food. But you've actually made a point over the years of connecting the dots between food and climate change, food and national security, food and education. You alluded to that through school nutrition. The impact of the stuff that we're talking about, which may seem at first blush small, is actually enormous.
Yeah, well, food is, look, food is the biggest industry that we have. Food is our most important engagement with the natural world. We affect nature, the environment, more through our eating choices than anything else we do. I mean, if you think about it, the landscape has been remade entirely worldwide by agriculture. The biggest contributor to climate change is the food system, broadly considered, when you include moving food around, processing food, growing food. And the composition of species on the planet. The species that have thrived, cattle, pigs, chickens, are the ones that we eat. And the species that are languishing are the ones that, many of which interfere with what we want to eat, wolves and things like that. So, if you want to talk about the environment, you have to talk about food.
Well, let's explain briefly how it impacts those three things I mentioned. So education, national security, and climate change. So education first, you again alluded to school nutrition. A better and more nutritious set of meals at schools makes students better students.
Yeah, well, and it's also a big part of the nutritional component of their days is the meal they get at school. It's our biggest food program for the poor is school meals, breakfasts and lunches. And
you've argued that they maybe should take the school lunch program out of the USDA and put it into the education department.
Right, or the health department, because food is too important to leave to the USDA, whose main goal is to advance, is basically to get rid of the agricultural surplus. And that's how they've looked at the school lunch program. Oh, we've got too much cheese, we'll dump it on the kids. Or last year when pork prices collapsed, they bought all this pork from the big pork producers and then they push it through the system. They're basically treating our kids as a disposal for agricultural surplus. And so nutritional standards are not front and center. So I think there's a huge conflict of interest between the USDA's goal, which is to get rid of food, and their other goal, which is to promote health.
Okay, how about national security? Talk about that.
Well, in a couple ways. Listen to Secretary of Defense Gates. He can't find enough soldiers because of the obesity problem. Thousands of soldiers were discharged last year because they're not fit. They're too fat. Or they have type 2 diabetes, or all these kind of chronic diseases that people in their 20s now get, that people used to get much later. That's one part of it. The other part of it is that our food system is an oil-based system. When you're eating from this industrial food chain, you're actually eating lots of oil. It takes oil to make that beef. Because of the oil to make the fertilizer, to grow the corn, to feed the animals, the oil to process it, the oil to move it around the country. And so, to the extent we've become oil dependent, and that drives our national security more than just about any other issue, it's a food problem. And the irony is, it's easier to fix in food than a lot of places. I mean, it is theoretically a solar technology, right? It depends on photosynthesis, which is the only free lunch in nature.
Right, that's true.
And so we've taken this system. It's kind of weird, though. If you go back before 1940, if you put a calorie of fossil fuel energy into a farm, and, calories, are just measures of energy, whether you're talking about food or oil. For every calorie of fossil fuel energy you put into growing food in the form of diesel for your tractor or whatever, you got out 2.3 calories of food. That's the free lunch. That 1.3 calories is the bonus that's coming down every day. Well, now, when you eat industrial processed food or feedlot meat, it takes 10 calories of fossil fuel energy to get 1 calorie of food. So that is there's unsustainability. There's a very good definition. You can't keep doing that very longer. So squeezing the oil out of the food system is a national security goal and an environmental goal.
Now, I'm assuming climate change ties back to agribusiness. Is that
Climate change is affected by agriculture in many different ways. One is the amount of fossil fuel that goes into it. The other is deforestation, big problem. We're seeing this in South America now, but all over the world. Most of the greenhouse gas that's been introduced by humankind over the centuries is a result of deforestation. There is also the fertilizers. Nitrogen fertilizer is a big greenhouse gas.
Right.
Methane from animal production, a very powerful greenhouse gas.
Right.
Our feedlots are just exhaling greenhouse gas.
Presumably, many of these problems would be also problems for smaller farms, for family farms, but the scale of agribusiness would make the problems greater.
Well, yes and no. I mean, it is a scale issue, but there are ways to grow food that we have today that actually sequester more carbon than they release. I mean, organic farming, for example, builds up carbon in the soils. It's a wonderful sink for carbon. Pastured livestock production, where you're moving the animals around and every day, and they're grazing a different section. You're stimulating lots of carbon sequestration.
Yep.
So there are actually ways to reorganize agriculture that would have the opposite effect. They could actually contribute to the solution to climate change. One estimate says that if all the agriculture in the country were organic, it would sequester something like 25% of anthropogenic greenhouse gas.
Why are we not doing more of that? Why is agribusiness not moving to these more earth-friendly, environment-friendly methods?
Well, because there's no penalty for not doing it.
And the cost to them of doing it the old way is better than the cost of doing it the new way.
Yeah, the system works very well for them.
Economics.
Although there's signs that changing. I mean, I think Walmart kind of has woken up to the fact that we have to get oil out of the food system.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that. You've been, I don't mean this in a negative way, but you're very good at identifying villains and have identified villains over the years. Tell me about some heroes. Give me one or two corporate interests who are actually headed in the right direction, who we can feel good about.
Corporate interests?
Corporate interests.
Well, I'm very encouraged.
Take a minute if you have to actually.
No, it's not that hard.
Yeah.
I think Walmart is a very interesting example. Walmart has made I think their commitment to sustainability, environmental sustainability, has been sincere. And they've done some very positive things. They've now decided to look at their food chain, supply chain, and see if they can't drive a lot of fossil fuel use out of that. And what they've come up with is basically a redesign of their distribution network to be more regional and less national. And they, like a lot of people, had a wake-up call in 2008 when we had that big spike in fuel prices. You know, the price of getting a box of broccoli from the Salinas Valley to the Hunts Point Market in New York went from $3 to $10. It was, a big deal in the food industry.
Sure.
In fact, some of the Salinas growers started leasing land in New Jersey to grow food there. Didn't work out very well.
Right. But you understand why the cost was just untenable.
And so Walmart had this, come to Jesus moment then too, and realized we have to figure out another way to do it. We don't want to be so dependent on. So they are going to, for a big company, it's a lot easier to buy all your carrots from one giant farm.
Sure.
One contract, one
get a better deal, probably, right?
Probably get a better deal. So, but it's much more sustainable to buy them from 50 different farms, and that's what they're going to do all along the eastern seaboard. They'll break it up into small farms. And you can grow great broccoli in New Jersey. It's just the arrogant farmers in California didn't know how to do it.
Didn't think
it's so easy. It's so much easier to grow it there.
Yeah.
Is this shown in California?
Not after this, actually. All right. So let's say Walmart is an example of a good.
So I think that's an example. I think Whole Foods has done a lot of good work on. I've been very critical of Whole Foods in some of my writings, but I think that they've done very good work on their meat supply chain in certain regions, especially.
They've revised some of that, haven't they, in the last couple of years?
They have. Yeah. They've really upgraded it. And I think that they're, I hear different things from farmers about Walmart. In certain regions of the country, they worship Walmart, and they think they're a wonderful buyer, great partner. They lend them money to build slaughterhouses, all this kind of stuff. Other regions are a little less thrilled, but basically they're trying to do the right thing too.